I have a lot of thoughts on the live action adaptation of How to Train Your Dragon, and I want to talk about it. My credentials are that I love Hiccup. He is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and evidently that means that I also love Toothless, and I literally have a Toothless tattoo on my thigh, so those are my credentials. I'm a big fan of the original trilogy, though that's more by association. What I'm truly a huge fan of is the first film, the first animated film. And I want to talk about why I love it so much and why I feel that some of the changes that they made to the adaptation were detrimental. So, first of all, I want to preface this by saying that the adaptation is, in my opinion, an objectively amazing one simply because of how faithful it was to the source material. It felt like a love letter or a letter of admiration for the original animated movie, and I personally enjoyed that a lot. I'm very grateful that they kept most of it untouched. However, they did make some small changes, some light tweaks. So even though they didn't modify any of their major plot points of the story, they did change some scenes and they did change some lines of dialogue that I believe were essential for the characterization of Hiccup in the original animated movie. So before I dive into that, I think that one of the things that made Hiccup, at least for me, such a compelling character was the fact that he was being othered by the members of Berg for virtually no reason, at least initially to me. Like, sure, he wasn't as tough or sturdy as some of the other Vikings, he was un-Viking-like, but they disliked him very profoundly for that. I mean, we have some of the other kids, teenagers, who were more Viking-like, sure, but they didn't have great achievements neither. None of them had captured a dragon. They weren't being very successful turning off the fires from the dragon attack. So then what was it about Hiccup that made all of Berg scoff and desire to look away? So I think that we were given some context clues for it, and I want to offer a little bit of my own interpretation, of course, of these scenes. So, I think that the reason Hiccup was so different to others was not much because of his physical appearance or his lack of physical prowess. It was just because of the way he thinks. And this is enforced in the scene where Stoic decides that Hiccup will join dragon training after his conversation with Gobbler, and he's breaking the news to Hiccup, and he says, "Yes, son, you will begin dragon training in the morning," and he's about to go off to try to search for the Dragon Island again, and he says something along the lines of becoming a Viking, a true one, and he says, "You walk like us, you talk like us, and you think like us." Like, that is the purpose of dragon training. And the sequence of this statement is very meaningful because the focal point is on think like us. This means that Stoic does not believe that Hiccup thinks like a Viking. And I think this is quite strange because in the opening scene of the film, which by the way is just masterful, like in my opinion it is truly a masterclass of storytelling. In the introduction of the movie, we have the dragons attacking Berg. And this is great because we have the exposition of Berg, like where the story is taking place. We're learning about the setting. We're learning about the dragons, which is one of the main hurdles to overcome, at least in the initial setup. We are learning about the way this society functions. We have world building because we're learning about the different types of dragons there are. And on top of it, we're learning about our protagonist. Not only about his role in this society, but also the way he perceives everything around him. Because we have his narration. So here, Hiccup is talking about the dragons in a very interesting manner. He's saying like, twice the heads, twice the status, or a grunkle, that could definitely get me a girlfriend. So he is dissatisfied with his current standing in Berg. But on top of that, he is viewing these dragons as opportunities, as tools to attain the social status he aspires to in this village. And that is very interesting because he is not humanizing these dragons. He feels no sympathy for them, at least not yet. He is not questioning whether Vikings should kill them or hunt them at all. He quite literally describes them as pests in the opening scene. So then, when Stoic says, "Think like us," referencing that Hiccup currently, at that point in time, during that conversation, does not think like a Viking, he cannot possibly be talking about a sympathy for dragons, because Hiccup possessed none up until that point. Sure, prior to this conversation, he had let the Night Fury go, but that was like 5 minutes ago. That wasn't a crucial part of his character yet. It was barely intentional. He couldn't quite process the reason why he did it. And most importantly, Stoic didn't know that happened. And I really gave this a lot of thought because I was thinking, what could Hiccup possibly have done to be perceived this way? I mean, they point at him. This is a recurrent joke in the film. You just pointed to all of me. Yes, change all of you. But what is all of him? And this is my interpretation of the scenes and the facts, but what I believe that they are referring to is the mind of an engineer, the mind of someone who is willing to understand things in a level that no one else has dared to before. So it's not just about his values, because at the beginning of the film, their values are aligned. And by the end of the film, his values are aligned with all of the others as well, but because he converted them into his way of thinking. So this is not a dissonance between systems of values. This was simply, in my opinion, about the way Hiccup literally receives, observes, processes, and acts upon the information that he has. So let me elaborate a little bit. Again, in the opening scene, everything happens in the opening scene. I swear, this opening scene is incredible. So in this scene, we see the Vikings trying to capture some of the dragons that are attacking the village, and Gobbler says, "You can't even throw one of these," and one of the Vikings grabs that capture weapon and tosses it at a dragon, and the dragon crashes against the floor, successfully grounded. And so Hiccup says, "Yes, I can't do that. That's why I created this." And it's his machine, and then it shoots off, it's triggered accidentally and knocks out one of the Vikings. And it's like a comedic scene that Gobbler uses to like prove his point. Like, "I told you, you're not meant for this." And Hiccup replies, "A mild calibration issue." And the value of the content that we had in this brief interaction, because first of all, Vikings go about things the obvious way, the Viking way. Stoic literally fights a dragon with his bare fucking fists, and he's winning. So this is the Viking way, just go for it. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm saying it out loud, this is also what Stoic was saying. This is also what Stoic was saying in that conversation with Gobbler. "When I was a boy, my father told me to, like, I don't remember the wording, but slam my head into this rock or something. And do you know what happened? It split in half." Like, just don't question anything and just do things. That is the Viking way. And Hiccup does not work that way, because had he thought about things that way, had he gone about it that way, he would have followed the regular, like, stereotypical, I suppose, hero's journey, like becoming stronger, training, becoming physically capable of all of the prowess that he aspired to. He would have become a great Viking by the end of the movie. But that is not what happens. And we see this from the opening scene. He creates a machine to do it for him, but more than that, he creates a machine that does it more efficiently than any other Viking could possibly do it. And this is not just what I think, this is factually what happens, because we mustn't forget that Hiccup is the first Viking to capture a Night Fury. His invention worked. Again, an invention that he came up with by himself and engineered calibrated shot by himself. It worked. So I think that this is the true core of what made Hiccup so different and so detestable to the other Vikings and remarkably his father. And so I think that this is what makes Hiccup's character so compelling and so interesting, so profoundly interesting, because this is a mind that is willing to adjust his reality to the information that he is receiving. When he decides to let the dragon go, when he decides to let Toothless go after successfully capturing him, that is of course a pivotal moment in his emotional journey. But what happens after that? Because that could have been a vital plot point. Okay, I discovered that I cannot possibly kill dragons. And now the story begins, and it could have been a different tale. I don't know, about how he hides this fact, about how he interacts with dragons moving forward, about how he sabotages the other Vikings as they are trying to capture dragons, something along those lines. But that is not what happened. What happens immediately afterwards is that after cooling down, I suppose, and digesting the scare, he goes after Toothless again. He pursues the dragon, but this time with curiosity to learn. He draws him, and this is what we see in the dragon book scene. He's searching for information on Night Furies, and there's none. And then the next day in training, he's supposed to be focusing on the dragon in front of him, and instead of that, he's questioning Gobbler. Here, is there like a Night Fury pamphlet that we could read? He's just trying to gauge as much information as he possibly can, because that is the way his brain functions. It's pure scientific curiosity. And so instead of just killing a dragon, or instead of just letting the dragon go, he learns from it. And he creates a connection with it, and then creates a prosthetic for a dragon to fly again. Who does that? That is the mind of a genius. It's not just about the engineering skills that go into it. It's about coming up with the idea and deciding to execute it. That is true madness. Brilliant. And well, I feel like this part of his character is what made it possible for him to, one, connect with Toothless to begin with, but also what made it so that he could shift all of Burke's perspective. Because he never would have defended dragons had he not learned about them. He never would have discovered the island had he not been able to ride Toothless and fly together. And all of those things were made possible because of his scientific curiosity, because of his willingness to unlearn things that he believed to be true but did not match the reality and the facts that he was facing. And so, when we have a character like him, who thought about dragons as pests, whose primary goal at the beginning of the movie was to slaughter a dragon, and then we put him in a position where he learns, hey, everything, and this is a pivotal scene that they took from the live action adaptation as well, and it broke me. Everything we know about you guys is wrong. And the original delivery of this line is wrong, like just the realization. This is not just about a moral quandary, like, oh, we shouldn't harm these creatures because they are innocent and they're just trying to protect themselves from their dragon queen. It's not even about that yet. He hadn't even learned about the nest yet. It's just, again, the facts, the ones upon which I built my opinion, my perspective, my worldview, they were not factual. And thus that worldview that I held is completely invalid. It is rendered useless. And so that is what made Hiccup my favorite character in nearly all of fiction. And I feel like they failed to capture the essence of that character in the live action adaptation. And it is interesting how they managed to undermine such a pivotal aspect of his identity with just a single scene. And it is, again, the dragon book scene. Because originally, Astrid just says, I already read it, and she leaves him alone, and he has the book by himself, and he just reads it. So in the adaptation, what happens is that actually Astrid snaps at him, which I think was a very interesting decision. It is very evident that that scene was added in order to deepen her character, to strengthen her in the eyes of the viewer, and I think it was very effective. It could have been executed better, because what ended up happening is that in order to strengthen her character, they ended up weakening his. And not just because of the argument itself. I don't believe that was inherent to the argument scene, just the argument that they placed on Hiccup's lips. And what he responded was basically, well, maybe they're not as bad as we think, or maybe they're just trying to protect themselves. And to me, this was a crucial mistake, because at this point in the movie, Hiccup has barely started observing Toothless. He doesn't have a relationship with him yet. He knows next to nothing about the dragons at this point. So to add this scene, but most fatally this line of dialogue here, it changes the context of Hiccup's sympathy for the dragons, because now, instead of it being the result of his continuous learning and studying and deconstruction of himself and his worldview, instead of all of that, it just seems as though either he is an inconsistent character, or he sympathized far too quickly with them, and it takes away from the merit of him learning about them. Quite simply, the reason that he was different to all the others, and the reason he was such a defective, quote-unquote, Viking, is that he had sympathy for the dragons. And hey, it ended up paying off, because it turns out he was right. Like, they were just trying to protect themselves, so we shouldn't harm them. And it takes away from that first part of his character. And another one of the changes that they made to Hiccup's character that I believe undermined his strength, at least in comparison to the original animated movie, is the scene where after Stoic takes Toothless and they part in search of the Dragon Island, he's left alone, and after Astrid encourages him to pursue them and to do something crazy, because he already did something stupid, he attempts to convince his other, ringmates, the other guys from dragon training, to join him. And in the original one, they follow him. I mean, I can only speculate as to why they did so, but in my interpretation, it is because they genuinely came to admire him. Even if some people perceived it as just a trick, a parlor trick of just deception, they saw him handling those beasts, and they came to admire what he was capable of doing, and independent of whether it aligned with traditional Viking values or the stereotype of what a Viking should be or not, they recognized that what he was doing was remarkable, and they followed him. That is what I choose to believe. And this is pivotal for, I believe that Hiccup has two arcs in the first movie, and that's the first one, like the internal one of realizing, like the way he perceives dragons and interacts with them, and the way he learns to reject Vikingness in a sense, and to stop pursuing that ideal and that his father's shining beacon of Vikingness, of what he should model himself after. That's the first one. And the second one is when he becomes a leader, like his father always wished he would be. And we see this in the opening scene as well, as he keeps referring to the opening scene, where he says, I have an entire village to feed. And Hiccup says, well, between you and me, the village could do with a little less feeding. Sure, it's a pun, it's a joke, but it shows us that he is immature in his perception of his role and his father's role in this society, in Verk, because his father is deeply concerned about the well-being of everyone around him, and Hiccup just simply doesn't care. He doesn't see it yet, and he's a kid, and it's understandable, but bottom line is he does not care. And so the second part of his arc, or his secondary arc, is to begin to care about the people around him. We must not forget as well that after he learned that he would have to kill a dragon in front of the whole village, he wanted to leave. He was about to leave with Toothless before Astrid showed up. He was abandoning his people. And there is a major shift in him at this point in time when he decides to go after his father. and to save them, because he knows that they are not prepared for what they're setting themselves up for. And so all of the other guys from his class, all the other students, I suppose, from his class, men and women, join him, and they go after him. And it's a beautiful scene. And I believe that they could have made it deeper, the same way that they added a scene to make Stoic seem like a more respectable leader. You know, the scene where he originally says, whoever says needs to look after Hiccup, and everyone's like, nope, let's go. And they replaced it with him giving a speech of leadership. I think that was a good change. So they could have done something similar here for Hiccup, but they didn't. And instead, the way they decided to go about things was just say, hey, why should we follow you? Da, da, da. And it's like, oh, Astrid says we should, let's do it. She says so, and she's like an actual Viking, so let's do it. So it completely undermines this transformation and to his baby steps into becoming a leader that Hiccup takes originally in this film. And also, it undermines the development of all of these other characters, all of these other future dragon riders. Because now, instead of being brave, not just for touching a dragon and petting it and riding it and flying for the first time, it's not just that, it's about daring to go against everything they believe, their whole perception of reality. That takes guts, and they did it. And in this one, it just seems like they're doing what the most Viking-like told them to, in the absence of the other Vikings. So those were the two primary changes that I disliked about this adaptation, which is strange because there were very little changes. So to say that some of the few changes that they did make were detrimental, and to such an extent, makes me believe that, I don't know if this was like a director's choice or like screen adaptation. I mean, it was already a movie, so I'm not entirely sure who is responsible or who was responsible for this set of decisions that arrived to this conclusion and this portrayal. But whomever was involved, and as many people as they were, I do not believe that a majority of the people involved in that process were attuned to what make Hiccup so admirable and so great in the first movie. I believe that they could have strengthened the secondary part of his arc, where he becomes a leader, he has those baby steps and to become the next chief. That would have been amazing. Instead, they chose to strengthen Astrid, which it's a choice for sure. I really loved the way they portrayed Astrid. The scene that they added where she's knocking down the dragon queen's teeth when she bit her dragon's tail, I think that was an amazing addition. I'm very content with Astrid's portrayal in this movie. Just wish that they could give Hiccup the same level of respect. So yeah, this is my opinion.